Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Sounds of Stadia podcast. Thanks for joining myself, Richie and Tom, in discussing this week's Stadia topics. On this week's show, we discuss last-minute delays of a marquee launch game, what we'd like to see during next week's Google event, a breakdown of the Stadia controller, and a few of our listeners' questions discussed. So, without further delay, Bethesda, on to the show. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of our Sounds of Stadia podcast. I'm joined once again this week by my usual co-host, the techie teacher himself, Tom, and Mr. Amiga, the man of many pixels himself because his internet's so slow, Richie.
Hello.
Welcome, gentlemen. Hello. Thanks again for joining me this week, the two of you. Hopefully you've both had good weeks with plenty of gaming highlights sprinkled in there. I wanted to start off again this week by thanking all of our listeners for following and subscribing over the last couple of days. We've seen a nice slight increase into episode 2, so we really appreciate that. Over on obviously all the usual social feeds, you can find us. So you've got twitter.com/Sounds of Stadia, and that's probably the best place to find all the information of when our episodes go live if you want to be kept in the loop. And you can also find the video format over on YouTube. If you just search for Sounds of Stadia, you'll see the logo, and the videos are all dropped in there in static image form. So to kick start this week then, I think I wanted to I know we had a section called What Stadia, and I've changed that now, both by my naming segments. So this one's What State Are Ya? Just to keep the trend going.
Where are we heading this week?
Where are we heading this week? Well, Tom, if you'd sit back and join me on a journey as we fly over the Atlantic, we'll head over to Georgia this week.
Georgia.
So yeah, all of our lovely people from Georgia, if there are any out there. And I've even got some facts for you now as well.
Wow.
Just thought rather than just name drop somewhere, I thought I'd actually educate you a little bit. So for those listeners who aren't from the States, or even if you are, and you just don't care about anything outside of your own four walls, Georgia is actually named after our very own king, King George II, apparently, when Europeans settled over there back in 1733. So before games were even thought of in existence. I don't think electricity was a thing, so good luck with that one. And apparently, another interesting... Another tidbit is they've got more soil types than any other state.
Bragging rights right there.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite interesting, actually.
So, yeah, fuck you, Texas and Florida.
We have more soil
you don't have this
Georgia.
So, yeah, definitely. So, that's my piece on states. Have you got anything you guys want to add on Georgia?
I, quite frankly, know two things about Georgia. That was named after King George and has more soil types than any other state.
Well, there you go. You've learned two things today, Rich. If you take anything away from this podcast, ladies and gentlemen, it is that Georgia has more soil than any other state.
You learn something
types.
every week.
We don't know it necessarily has more soil.
All right, that's true, yeah. Well, if you dig deep enough, right? Speaking of digging holes, I'm going to get out of this one right now and move on to another segment of this episode. To get us started, we have, once again, I'm going to try and say it without stuttering this week, unless someone else would like to have it a go.
Are we going to the super sexy special Stadia story segment?
I believe so. Well done. AKA,
that was quite sexy, Tom.
Yeah, you should do this from now on. Like I said, someone said they wanted a jingle with it, so definitely we can work on something there. Get that jingle going.
We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out as we go.
We'll figure
it out. Right, so yeah, just to kickstart us off then, we've had some news drop this week, some big news in terms of Rivals, and we've got a few game updates, and there's an event on the horizon. So to start off with then, we found out, unfortunately, halfway through this week, that Doom Eternal has been delayed until 2020.
Yeah,
a bit of a shock, that one, I think.
It is, but I'm not sure as big of a shock as people are realising, because everyone's got this idea of November for the launch of Stadia, but that's just the Founders Edition. So the soft launch, the hard launch will be next year, sometime in the first quarter. So it could be a matter of weeks after the Stadia is launched fully before Doom's there.
Yeah, so I see what you mean there. Yeah, you kind of. I think we sometimes do forget that because we're in on the Founders Edition.
Yeah.
But yeah, actually, this isn't going to impact most people until it goes free and that base edition drops, which, like you said there, Richie, it might just tie in nicely with the kind of the relaunch essentially of Stadia in 2020. I think the biggest thing what's caught most people out is Doom's been kind of showcased as the kind of flagship position for frame rate, for graphic fidelity, and everything that Stadia's been to kind of push out there into the public. And I know everyone who's gone to the game and press events since it was announced, they've all came back saying Doom runs fantastically. It definitely sets a benchmark. So I think, that being their poster boy, and then all of a sudden it's not going to be there at Founders launch, I think that's just sent a few ripples out there.
It has, and I think Google need to get ahead of the messaging, because Doom have actually, I can't remember the details, but did actually, Bethesda did get in front of the messaging on it, and like things like Doom 64 is coming with the pre-order and things like that. So Bethesda and id Software are actually doing good things there.
Yeah, they're trying to spin it in a positive light.
Yeah, but that's the developers and the publishers. I haven't heard anything from Google. So I think Google need to get in front of this a bit. Because it's one thing me saying, it doesn't seem as bad because of the soft launch for the Founders, but that should be coming from Google, not me.
It's one of those like kind of echo chamber things where those who are interested in it, naturally when you see the news drop on your Facebook feed or your Twitter feed or something, you think, damn it, that's been delayed. But yeah, I think the reality is, if you're not maybe that interested in the game, if you're not maybe like a shooter type person and you just got a general interest in what Stadia has at launch, there's still an entire catalog there of games to play. So I think maybe if you've got that attachment to it, it hits harder at home than it would for other people.
Absolutely, but you've got to also think about as well with Doom, they have such there's such a history to that series as well. I mean, we're talking going back decades, really, aren't we? You guys, you've probably had an experience at some point of playing one of the original Dooms, or at least you've seen it, haven't you? So there'll be a lot of people, particularly like the older gaming market, that I'm starting to feel like I'm part of now. Growing up, I've played the original Dooms. I used to spend my lunch times at school playing Doom on the computers at the back of my IT room. Well, so yeah, I'm quite invested in it. It is unfortunate, but looking on silver lining, that the positive side of things. Let's look over to it's going to come out hard launch, as you said, Richie, when Stadia is rolled out, other than the Founders Edition, to the standard editions and so on there.
I think we're all part of the older library. I mean, we all existed for games were routinely in 3D.
True that.
Yeah, we struggled through the polygonal phase that was PlayStation 1, Dreamcast, and GameCube, I think.
Wow.
N64. Some of the N64s are classic games, but you can count the polygons.
Yeah, the resurgence in kind of indie-like side scrollers and that kind of pixel art, which looks absolutely gorgeous, and it gives me such good nostalgia vibes when I go back and play those. But yeah, some of the ones that kind of made that transition across to what we currently know, they didn't do well at all. I can't see them ever getting a life on Stadia, if I'm honest, either. They're from a bygone era that I think is left out.
Bring back the arcade.
Yeah.
Well, it's that clunkiness that adds a bit of humor, but it's a really weird one that it's kind of stuck in the middle ground between it.
I haven't dug into it, but I think arcades are even actually on the decline in Japan, who have been like the one last bastion of the arcade.
Wow. So that's unfortunate. I was hoping we would get to a point where we actually had a resurgence of arcades and that sort of like 80s video game culture again. I was really hoping for that.
Same, but I'm not sure it's a viable model. Because if you're paying, a couple of pounds to every time you play a game, every time you're alive, you could spend 100 quid in the arcade in a single day.
Yeah.
Walk away with nothing, where you could just buy a game, especially with Stadia.
Well, that's it. Then you talk now like how everything switched to that subscription model.
Yeah.
And the reality is, why would I go somewhere and pay 50 pence, $1 to play a game for, like you said, Richie, 1 or 2 lives? Like, there's nothing more frustration, especially when you're a child. And you just run out of money, and that's it. That's the end of it. No matter how far you got, your time on there is limited. Whereas nowadays, you can just pick up your iPhone, jump onto something like Apple Arcade. You pay your 1 monthly subscription. You've got an entire library of games there at your disposal, totally free, no microtransactions, just good to go. Yeah. Or in this case with Stadia, to bring it full circle, is you could have your Google Pixel phone, just jump on, hook your controller up to it, and have Red Dead Redemption 2 in the palm of your hand, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So why would you go hang out with your friends and socialize and see people who you've never seen in a good while? Society's dead.
It takes me back to thinking about those Nintendo Switch launch adverts. Where if you remember back to them, they had like the woman who went to the house party and took a Switch and put it at like the rooftop party and playing Mario
Yes,
Kart.
yeah.
And wasn't
like
immediately told to put it away.
Yep. You're here to
What are you doing,
socialise.
Sharon? We're having shots.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it works.
There's a different way that could spin off though, and like things like board game cafes are on the rise. So instead of actually having this is an arcade where you go to play games that are there, this is a place where you can go and sit there and play games and socialize, but you bring them yourself.
Yeah, I think the model works in certain elements, but yeah,
That works.
yeah,
that could work nicely for both Switch and Stadia. Like, yeah, pick up your Switch, go sit down, have a coffee, and hang out with like-minded people.
Yeah,
There's a thing there.
they're trying a little bit in our game branches over here, where I don't know about you, Tom, but I know there's a few near us that have changed into their Beyond section,
Yes,
which
I'm
has
aware
kind
of
of got
Beyond.
all the game and PC rigs. I mean, I know Curry's PC World as well. They do the same thing, where they've got their segments where you can actually book in for essentially a birthday party or a class or a group. And play on like these top end spec PCs, and you see kids in there all the time. It's kind of like that is the new going to a soft play area kind of scenario, I think, for growing up, but it hasn't quite transcended, I don't think, into the kind of adult gaming market. I don't mean adult gaming market. I just mean like people who don't want to go and hang out in a shop when realistically they've probably got the money to purchase it and use it at home because they're adults who have jobs. They don't need pocket money to just go and have some fun with their friends down at the local game shop. But yeah, I know, like Richie, I think there's a few in London that we've seen where they do like board game setups. You go have a couple of pints and stuff and just play, and it is really, really good. But yeah, it'd be great to see something like that kind of maybe mixed in with arcade come to life over the next couple of years.
It's close at home. I work with people who play Magic the Gathering, so they go to places even in the town we are in. So these things exist pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, I know the Games Workshops are still quite good, like that kind of setup where they give a free open space for you to jump into and just do what you want with it. Far and few between, unfortunately, though, but it's always still times on our side.
True that.
Yeah. So we started this talking about Doom. Now we're talking about board game cafes.
Surely there's a Doom board game. There's got to be a Doom board game somewhere.
Probably on Kickstarter today.
Yeah.
We'll
delay it until
one.
2021. I think we might have a copyright problem with that one.
Yeah.
But,
get Bethesda on board.
We could. You never know. Like they're after these wins after Fallout 76, which isn't coming to Stadia. So I wonder why that might be. I think they're trying to definitely move on from that. I can imagine the kind of higher ups when the development team came and said, "Look, we need to delay this until 2020." Them just hitting their head off the desk, thinking, "Oh, but we're just kind of recovering from the Fallout fiasco."
You'd imagine one of the reasons Bethesda didn't want to delay it is because they were aware. They've probably been aware for a while of, say, Sony are going to launch PlayStation 5 in 2020, so they don't want to be too close to the new console going, because otherwise people will be going, why am I bothered buying that game when the new consoles are on the horizon? I need my money for the console.
Yeah, it's you want to kind of stay away from that as much as possible. People do get quite thrifty around a console launch.
It's a tough balance sometimes. It is a tough balance between trying to launch a game and try to time it for console release, time it for new device release, and so on. Do they do it at the launch of something, or do they just go ahead and try to dominate the market during a certain time of year? It's like film releases. You know, they pick certain times where they have to go ahead and just say like, right, okay, what's our competition? Or would it be better to hang on to like the Christmas season?
Yeah, there's no perfect time nowadays. That's the problem, because the kind of the games calendar that we base off now doesn't have any quiet seasons. It's very much just month after month you're getting great exclusives, great launches. The tech industry doesn't stop for anybody. It's constantly, whether it is just games or it's the mobile market or it's televisions, movies, like you said, Tom, music. That whole entertainment industry does not stop. It's a juggernaut that's constantly dropping new and interesting stuff. Like never ending. Like, I mean, you just have to look at the Netflix model for it. It seems like they drop a brand new exclusive to Netflix or Amazon do it. Like there's a show every other week, almost to a point where you're oversaturated and you can't keep up. So in light of that, then, if Doom has been delayed, what do we think is kind of pushed to the forefront for Stadia's launch then now?
Well, Assassin's Creed has been one that's been showcased quite a bit. But again, this is an old game.
That's it. All games.
Old in quotation marks there, because it's like a year and a half old. But
it's not quite the original Doom old. We'll say that much.
But
yeah. So something from that portfolio has to come front. And I guess at the moment, looking at the scope and the size, does that default to Red Dead now? Looking at that games list.
But again, the issue I think here is that Red Dead has already been released and has had time on console. It's established, yes, fair enough. But now I'm sort of thinking in the back of my head, and a lot of people are also doing the same sort of thing right now, is we have no new titles, none of that sort of like AAA size really that are currently at the forefront to come out with the release. So now this becomes a little bit of an issue here. Something needs to fill this spot and needs to take this spot quickly, I think, in order to try to get people excited once again.
Yeah, it's. I mean, should we expect an announcement still? Like, I'm still holding out the hope that when they have this next Google Connect, which we'll get onto, hopefully they're going to drop some more information. You've got to think they've got some games that they're keeping quiet, they're hush on at the moment, just to give that new level of energy injected into it for launch. Because like we've known about this list of games for some time, and I know a few more keep getting dropped onto it. But you're right there, Tom. Yeah, they need that. This is day and date brand new. So while the conversation on all the other platforms is about whatever game it may be, this needs something. What do we have in November that's actually coming out?
Don't know. I'm going through the list at the moment, looking at the games that are jumping out that I could be there. Baldur's Gate 3 is sometime 2023. Marvel's Event 2020, not 2023.
I was going to say. Maybe it's not. That one might not be cooked just in time for launch.
Yeah, Marvel's Avengers 2020, Cyberpunk's 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we see some WWE.
Well, that's it. This is the perfect time where if they could get in on these third-party developers we spoke about last week, that you could drop Call of Duty. I mean, it comes out at the end of the month, so you could, like, yes, it might be a week or two behind, but it's better than next year. It's much better than that.
I mean, timing wise, perhaps Google need to invest in trying to get some more involvement from those big developers. I know we keep talking week after week about EA and Activision and so on, but if you look at the release date for again, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, something that I am incredibly excited about, November 15th release date. So to me, that's sort of, it's right in the middle of that November release right there. If Stadia comes out, can they get EA on side in time to have that as potentially a release title? Because something like that might grab people's attention.
I think we touched on this a bit last week. They might already have EA on title, because I think they've already had Rockstar with Red Dead in the works, probably well before they announced Red Dead 2's coming.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Maybe they're waiting for a Stadia Connect where they go, here's the date, here's the release of the Founders Edition date, here's the standard launch. Oh, and by the way, here's what EA thrown at it day one.
Yeah, almost dedicate the Stadia segment of the next Connect to EA.
Yeah, you'll need more in the Connect, I think, than just 2 release dates. You'll need some games, really. And if they go, Jedi Fallen Order, especially with this news, Doom getting knocked back, and go, okay, unfortunately, Doom, with Bethesda decided they need more time with Doom. However, you're getting Star Wars. Have fun.
Yeah, I think they do really well to do just kind of like a montage video of this is the games we've got so far, and then segment that in with just bang, 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 bang. Here's another bunch of amazing games that we've been sitting on. We've been crying out for them or something, or they're in the pipeline for launch, and then here we go, just announce them, just to get that hype, build that like final last bit of energy that you need to launch a brand new product into an industry.
And maybe this is the the big brain works of someone like Phil Harrison at Google, where they are starting to think now about how do we spin this to the best, like to our advantage, in order to prepare for the release. Because at this point now, we're already talking about the Founders Editions are starting to sell out and have sold out in certain countries. So now they need to try to get the other purchasers on board. They need to try to get people ready for the standard edition, but also try to finish off with those Founders ones there. So again, do we look at seeing at the next Connect? What day do we have on the Connect, guys?
It's Tuesday.
Oh, on Tuesday. So 2 days.
Oh, sorry. So it's not called the Connect. Sorry.
Okay.
The Connect is, I think, the name they have for their Stadia content. But Google does have an event on Tuesday for theory, it's going to be the Pixel. It's definitely the Pixel, but it's probably going to expand on their home products. However, in one of their official posts, I did notice there was a Stadia controller on the shelf in the background, curiously poised, sat there in shot, which obviously isn't a mistake. So it's fingers crossed they're going to drop something in there. I hope it's not all the information is kind of blended in with this, because I'd like Stadia to keep being its own individual presence.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want it to become part of that.
They need to keep the messaging clear. I think you can put some stuff in there about Stadia in the Google event, but you don't want the big reveals there, because people interested in Stadia might not be looking at it.
Yeah, I wouldn't want it to get kind of washed down with, oh, here's all these new Pixel products, and also like segmented in there is the tiniest little bit of news that blah, blah, blah.
By the way, we've got EA on board now.
Yeah, I'd rather that was a full-on dedicated to Stadia, which I think they do want to keep them very separate. They don't want to muddy the water too much with cross.
Maybe we'll get a Connect announcement at the.
That'd be great. Something really tongue-in-cheek, like, oh, you may have noticed the controller sat on the shelf back here, and then he just goes and grabs and goes, we've got more news coming next week, or whenever it may be, and just drop that, because then it continues the hype, doesn't it? I definitely think. So to might as well move on to that then. Now we've slowly segued into it.
Before we move on, what do you guys think about, because you know they're going to bring it for Stadia Pro, bring out a new game every month, and we know November is Destiny 2.
Mm-hmm.
What if, so assuming that in Stadia Connect, it's centered around EA, what if they're saying, okay, Stadia Pro members, December, he's FIFA 2020?
Or the Grinch.
Because that's a way of, in a controlled way, going, okay, EA might go for it because you're getting those with the Founders Editions only getting it for free to get that ecosystem up and running. So when the Stadia comes out, you can go, well, with all these people already playing.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they'd probably have to go big with something that's not as broad as a sports game, because I think we saw that with the PlayStation Plus when
it's also tough with such a newly released title as well. I mean, again, from a business perspective, you've got to start thinking about like what the EA lose out from that. How do Google compensate for that loss of sales in a certain way? I don't know. I mean, it would be awesome, but I'm erring on the side of
I mean, do we think that they'd go into the library that currently exists and pull a game from there, or do we think it would be a brand new game announcement? Because the good thing with Stadia, what they've got going for them, is that the portfolio is not that big. So there's a massive back catalogue of games that do exist there that they can just pull out and be like, right, you had Destiny to start with. Come December, here is another game that's not on our list. Because I'd be a bit disappointed if they went into their currently announced games and just randomly plucked out one and went, in December you're going to get Rage 2, which wouldn't be terrible, but we've known Rage 2 is available on the platform, and they risk anyone who buys it day one in November suddenly going, I've literally had this platform for 2 weeks and now you're giving me Rage 2 for free. So I think it definitely has to be an unknown title, but they've got that luxury of there's 1,000,001 games out there that they haven't announced yet, that they just have to hash out that deal. And again, you've got to think they've got that roadmap in place for well into 2020 already, because these negotiations can't be done overnight because the specs have to port to Stadia.
Going back to the Bethesda link, what do you think? Do you think it could be Skyrim? It's on everything else.
I mean, inevitably that will happen.
Hit Skyrim for free, guys. Have fun.
That might be their apology play. They'll come out and say, we're really sorry, Doom Eternal didn't hit its launch date. He's Skyrim. Just because we've got several different versions of that ready to go on the fly.
Do you know what? Knocking them for what it's worth, though, right? If they release Skyrim with all the DLC, a full package of it, I'm probably still going to play it. Like, I probably will still invest in going back into it again.
You know what, Tom? I've got Skyrim on my Switch. Because it's just one of them games I will pick up every now and again. So I wanted it on my Switch. And it's fine.
Yeah. We mock them, the gaming industry. They get mocked for it, but people still buy into it. So, and I am one of those suckers. I'm going to get it. So
can I tell you guys a secret?
What?
I've never played Skyrim.
Wow.
This might be the option
Sorry.
to jump in.
Sorry.
Anyway,
No, I've dabbled. I think I played the start round somebody's house before, and it was one of them where it never, I don't know what it was, whether it was people I was talking to, what I was playing at the time, whether I was really into like shooters or something, but for whatever reason, it totally passed me by, and then it got to that point where people were talking about it and you kind of just didn't want to be missed out the conversation. So you just go, yeah. I mean, I know plenty about it from just like pop culture and like again being tuned into the games industry. And it's just one of those things where I've never had the time, I think, to sit down. Same with I didn't start The Witcher until this year. And it was just one of them things where I think it's just, if you miss that window of opportunity, jump in, like we're talking with these games missing their launch windows, you do lose some of the fan base, where it's really weird because that whole fantasy, dragons and swords and shields, that's right up my alley. But for some reason, yeah, missed out. So if it does come to Stadia, I guess I'll probably have to jump in and give it a go.
Yeah.
But yeah, do any of you two have any gaming shameless secrets that everyone talks about and you think, you know what, never touched?
I've got to admit, this is one of those things that when somebody poses the question to me, I don't really have an answer formulated, but there are so many titles I have never played.
You played Solitaire on the PC?
I dabble.
That's that. We must be one of the most played games in the world ever that no one actually acknowledges.
Yeah, I'm at a loss to try and think of something right now. Maybe we should have a think of next week and put it as a segment for next week. I'll get our shame list.
You can have that bell of shame ring as well. So that's mine. So apologies to anyone out there who now hates me, but it is what it is. Can be helped. I'll get around to it one day. That's the great thing with it. I don't think it's to
be shamed that you haven't played Skyrim.
I feel that way, Tom. I feel that way.
But the thing is, as Richie said,
a big commitment.
It is a huge commitment. It's like the actually there we go. I've just found my shame game right there. I have now Richie, you might be quite disappointed by this. I own The Witcher 3. But I've never really played it. I never played 1. I never played 2. I own all of them, in fact.
I'm actually wearing a Witcher t-shirt right now. So
I got to the very first town, I think, in The Witcher 3, and then I sort of stopped, and I can't remember why. But I keep telling myself I need to go back, I need to play it, but
Yeah, you do. Literally, you start the game, you kill a few monsters, and you go to the first town.
Yeah.
So you've probably played for about 10 minutes.
Probably. It sounds about right.
I don't feel as bad now, though.
Yeah.
Take some of the onus away there.
Yeah, that's it. It's shared.
It's fine. Not every game's for everyone.
Now Richie's played it. There's lots of games I have played. I'm sure we'll get through them lists at some point. We'll get onto those.
Thousands of games I haven't played. Anyway, should we move on?
Thousands. So we touched on it briefly there, but the Google event coming Tuesday, 15th dropped as well. So hopefully we are going to get some information on that before the week's out, which we'll bring to you guys listening next week. Hopefully a breakdown of loads of juicy information on Stadia. But as it stands, it's very much going to be a Pixel Home event. I'm not 100% sure what the official title is they've gave, but from my experience, what they do generically every year is he's the new Pixel phone, which inevitably will be the Pixel 4, 4a, XL. They're the three variants they always go with. Naturally, it's going to be probably the only place you can play Stadia on mobile as it stands, because I know they've caveated that in there with the current Pixel range. You can play Stadia. I can't imagine it's going to be long until it goes all Android and even iOS, because they're going to want to get it. Once I think base launches, it'll be everywhere mobile. And again, it's at the moment it's anything that runs Chrome, which all mobile devices can do anywhere. But I think they will launch, announce the Pixel phones. There'll be loads of new features. They'll focus on the camera as per usual, improved battery, camera screen, like you get with every yearly iteration of a mobile device. No doubt there'll be new Pixel books announced in there. They like to drop that, and probably a refresh of their home products, so the little speakers that similar to Amazon Echo and Alexa and stuff like that. But I'm hoping, they do bring some Stadia news to it. But even if that is just an announcement regarding the new launch information, like this Connect that we've been desperately waiting for, because we are currently in the middle of October now, so the clock is definitely ticking, and I don't think they can leave it too last minute to build up that hype. I'd like to see a nice slow trickle of a couple of weeks of information now that really starts to swell and build up this kind of desire to jump in with it.
We are counting down the days, essentially.
The days to a date we don't know.
Surprised we don't even. We're assuming that there's going to be a Connect, because it'd be weird not to have one. But it's surprising that we don't have the date for the Connect at least, because when they've basically got 2 weeks till November, and if they haven't had that Connect this month, then you've got everyone who's bought the Founders Edition going, where's Stadia?
Yeah, there's going to be a point where the people with the pre-orders are now going to start thinking, right, I've invested in this product, yet I don't know when I'm getting it. Because all we know is November. Is that start of November, mid? Is it likely to be late, pushing closer to the Christmas winter period? But as you say, we need information at this point. We need it.
Yeah, I think people are a bit starved for just news. And like I said, with news like the Doom being delayed, it's not the best kind of ripple effect you want in the industry. You want to have that everything's positive leading up to launch. But I'm sure we'll find out. I'm sure they've got it. We can only speculate at the moment. Again, we've got to remember that Google's a lot more than just Stadia as it stands, and preferably I'd rather them keep it separate. But I think that's all we can speculate on for now. So moving on to the third news segment of this week, we have some rival news again. We don't mean to keep talking about rivals in such detail, but as it stands, as I say every week, we currently can't play Stadia games. So for the time being, we'll talk about what we are playing. And we had some big news from PlayStation. So off the back of Sean leaving last week, we got some news on PlayStation 5 official. That's its name. That's going to be Stadia's rival in the next year or so. PlayStation 5, no doubt, I think that they're going to call it that name, which I'm glad they went with, because it's just nice, easy, just follows the trend, goes with it. But we did get some information on the new DualShock 5, which comes out, which we can talk about, because the Stadia also has a controller. So Tom, I think you've done a little bit of research.
It's a link. It's a good stretch, but we'll go with it.
They're both use controllers. So I'll hand over control to Tom, who's done a bit of research on it, on how the information we know about the new, presumably going to be called DualShock 5 controller, pairs up with what the current standings are of the Google Stadia controller.
Cool. It's confirmed to be DualShock 5, isn't it?
No, I don't think they said PlayStation 5, but everyone's just in that weird limbo stage where they're just theorizing. I mean, inevitably, surely they've got it. What's the point in changing the name of convention of what everyone knows it as? Even though I just say PS4 controller, I don't think I actually ever refer to it as DualShock. If it even has DualShock anymore, because as we'll get onto now, it's not really that anymore.
Well, if you go back through the last few iterations of the console, we have got, the DualShock 2, 3, 4. It again, like the name of the console, it probably is going to be dubbed the DualShock 5. I'd put money on it. I would. I'd put money on it. I don't see Sony changing it.
Likewise, why should they? If they randomly come out and go, oh, it's the HandPod 5000.
Well, they're not going to pull like a Microsoft with, all these different iterations of the Xbox and changing it up. And then we go back to the Xbox One, even though that was the first one. And it suddenly becomes a mess, right? Just keep it simple. Just follow what they've currently done. It doesn't matter if they pull a Final Fantasy and end up on the DualShock 15 with the PlayStation 15, right? It's a brand that has run for countless decades now, and we know where we're currently at with it. We just know what iteration we're currently on. It's the 5th iteration. Stick with it.
Will they go with Roman numerals for this one, do we think?
Ooh, that's the question, isn't it?
Go for that V.
Stay techie, stay trendy, keep it the normal numbers.
I think Sony will just keep the branding's always been nice and clean. PlayStation, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3. Just call it PlayStation 5, DualShock 5.
Yeah, but could you picture that PlayStation logo with encompassed in a massive sharp V on the front of it?
PlayStation V.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can use it
somewhere there will be concept art for that up in.
Oh God,
their
amongst the awful
you can even
concept.
do it, but just call it PlayStation 5. You can have the PSV as the shorthand.
Yeah, I mean we joke, but I'd much rather just stick to the name and conventions that work.
Absolutely. I'm going to run through a couple of the specs just to begin with, just to tell you what has been confirmed so far about the supposed DualShock 5 controller. Then we'll take a look back at the Stadia controller as of what we know at the moment, based on some of the hands-on approaches, that sort of thing, and then gauge your opinions on how you feel at the moment, if that's cool with you guys. So from the top, looking at the news this week, we could see that the PlayStation 5 controller is, first of all, now they are finally going to move into this idea of having an adaptive trigger. So we have levels of resistance when you play games. Now, this is something that has already existed with Xbox controllers, but never really made its way to PlayStation for some reason. With the PS4, it never became a thing. The idea is
the Elite controller, though, wasn't it, for the Xbox? So it was a premium thing, not a standard thing.
That's right, but the Elite controller came with the 360, didn't it?
I don't know. I'm sure it wasn't an
Yeah.
Xbox One Elite controller or something to that effect.
As far as I can remember, I believe, and again, I'm not fully geared up on this because I only played part, like, I didn't really invest in an Elite for the Xbox 360 generation, but my understanding was there was a series of controller that did include the adaptive triggers, but it was definitely a rollout feature on the One, or the One Elite, as you said. But the idea is that you feel tension as you're pulling those triggers on the controller there. So once you actually start pushing it down, depending on how the programmers set it up, whether you're using a bow and arrow in a fantasy game or whether you're using a gun in a shooting game, you'll start to feel resistance depending on the type of weapon, and that can be tailored there. So that's something that Sony are now finally getting involved in, which I think that's pretty cool.
I do like the sound of it. The thought, like, immediately when they described it as pulling like a bowstring back and feeling that tension, I do think it's one of those immersion points.
Yeah.
Which I think again, it's more immersion sounds better. I remember when we all started playing racing games and they had rumble and you went on a rally track onto the sand and there was that noticeable difference between smooth driving and then off road. It does add that thing, and I think now we've become so desensitized because controls have had rumble for so long now. If you turned it off, I bet it would actually feel slight. You'd notice a difference because it's just part of the consciousness now. So I think a few things that they mentioned regarding, I think, walking on different platforms. I think they mentioned if you walk on ice, your joysticks will be a little more loose, and then if you're going through something like mud, it'll feel like that extra bit of tension, which I think, immersion totally. If you're playing a story game like The Witcher, Tom, that'll just add a lot more dynamic levels of kind of movement, and it's something so little, but we take it for granted, and by the sounds of it, they're definitely touting about it, so it must be important.
And we've also got, moving on from that, sort of linking directly into it, they've also announced haptic feedback, which, again, talking about this rumble feature, haptic feedback is something that, we're starting to see an emergence in this type of technology now. Now, for those of you at home, haptic feedback is essentially some sort of effect that is applied to a device or to a sensation that makes you feel some sort of resistance, or it changes the way that you feel things. Exactly like you said, Chris, that immersive element of things. It's something that if for any of you guys who might have seen the film Ready Player One quite recently, actually, the idea of specifically in like a virtual reality world, you might be able to feel and grab objects with it. Now, how they actually integrate it into a controller is still waiting to be seen. But if, as you say, Chris, if you have that sort of feeling that, features of the controller suddenly start to change the feeling, the way based on the environment you're in, then perhaps that's a good start. Perhaps it is. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that in particular.
I think just if they detail it enough, and I think if developers do actually jump on board and use it, it can be really well. I'm sure I've got memories playing PlayStation 2 games when if something's trying to build up tension and they'll do the typical, they'll lower the music down so it gets nice and quiet and you're walking around like a corridor or something. And then I think it was Dino Crisis, I want to say,
Classic.
PS1. And I think the addition of the DualShock, that vibrate for I think it was a Tyrannosaurus footprints walking in the distance, and it's that no noise, just the controller in your hand. It does really good to kind of bring what you're watching on a TV screen into something physical that you can tangibly feel. And I think if the developers do it right, as you mentioned there, it could add loads of like nice little subtle levels of depth to these detailed story games that we've come to know.
Yeah, I agree. Rumble is one of them things that I don't notice it when I'm playing a game, but if it wasn't there, I'd notice its absence. And I think it's not going to change how games play, but it is going to. It's another level of immersion. I think it's what I want from the next generation of DualShock. Just take the DualShock 4, which is a very good controller, and do these little tweaks to make it slightly better in a lot of probably unnoticeable ways, really.
Yeah,
agreed. I think it's one of them. 1 year after using the DualShock 5, you pick up your DualShock 4 and goes, this feels old, feels cheap, feels weird.
There was a really simple addition they actually added on the DualShock 4 last time round, which was the speaker on the front. Again, very underutilized. It doesn't do that much in games, but I do remember playing Killzone Shadowfall from the launch window of it, playing at nighttime, all lights off, just the TV and the little light on the front of the controller. And I think there was one point you went into a room and loads of people had been burnt. So there's just loads of crisp bodies lying around. You're going through, it's all quiet. It's supposed to be, it's got a very horror trope to this particular part of the game. And I picked up an audio log, and out of nowhere, the controller starts screaming at me because someone's, I believe it's from this previous scene where they're on fire, and someone's recording an audio log as they're actually about to hit their imminent death. And honestly, it scared the shit out of me.
Fantastic.
And
Just
when you're talking
want.
about
Yeah.
them types of tropes, that's that external level of immersion where I went from just casually playing a game, enjoying it, to it made it really, really real very quickly just by that different levels of immersion. And I think all this haptic feedback stuff could do that great for a lot of variety of games, whether it is racing to sports to action, adventure and such.
My issue with things like the gimmicks that they always put in the controllers is if PlayStation, you mentioned the speaker, I don't think there's a speaker on the Xbox One controller, which means third-party developers are unlikely to utilize that feature because then they have to develop systems for 2 different consoles for the same game.
Well, this is why we need it to become an industry standard.
Well,
If they all go
haptic
for
feedback, however, I think, well, yeah, you can just have it developed for PlayStation and tone it back for the others if it doesn't have it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Switch has got HT Rumble, so it could work there. And I just, you saw on camera, I do have my Switch on my desk. That's hence the gesture.
gesture off.
We are moving towards a point where haptic feedback is going to start being, I can see it as being one of the next steps forward in technology in terms of the immersion of a video game. We're already seeing companies that are designing sort of vests that you can wear while you're gaming, where you can feel rumble like on your body as well, based on things like being shot by an enemy, just to sort of simulate that experience as well. Because we're all, at some point in the future, we're going to be strapped into chairs with VR headsets on, and we're just going to be literally living the game. That's where we're trying to get to. That is full immersion right there. But baby steps. We'll start with the controller.
Yeah.
As long as when you get shot, the rumble's not too severe. I don't actually feel like I'm being shot.
Different levels of strength compared to what bullet round you were hit with. Yeah, if you take a shotgun shell to the face, you're not having tea that afternoon.
In Call of Duty, you end up on the floor in agony.
Yeah,
Number of
gaming related
work
today, I got shot in a virtual world.
While we're talking about the DualShock 5, from what I understand of the Google Stadia controller, it's basically seems similar to the previous generation controllers. Do you think that has a risk of feeling already left behind, the controller?
Okay, one of the big criticisms at the moment of the Stadia controller, and I'm really glad you mentioned that, because that was going to be the next point on here, is that I mentioned to Chris just before the show started, but a lot of people are talking about, at the moment, we don't know too much about it. Only certain companies have had their hands on with it. But the feedback is coming in that the triggers on them, they feel
feedback, Tom.
Yeah, it's the triggers are unremarkable. They are sort of like that previous gen sort of feel. There's no haptic feedback. There's no adaptive trigger there. We don't know what the battery life is going to be like. But one of the things that is standing out about the Stadia controller is people are describing it as not feeling so sturdy. It doesn't feel like it's got a lot of weight to it. So it feels quite light. Whereas like the Xbox controllers, the DualShock controllers, we know that they have a bit of weight to them, and that weight tends to feel good rather than like,
you want to feel like you're holding something, don't you? You don't want it too
you don't want to feel like it's going to break in your hands.
No, absolutely not. But don't let it all be negative. There are some really, really good pieces of feedback that you can see online about the controller at the moment, and it does look promising. So the one thing that I want to talk about quickly as well is moving from the PS5 back to Stadia, bringing it back on topic, is the idea that, first of all, we know the Stadia controller is going to connect via Wi-Fi. Now, a lot of people have been asking questions like, how does that actually work? What's the benefit of it over the Bluetooth connectivity or infrared connectivity? Well, the fact is simple. Think about what Stadia actually is. We can launch a game on our desktop computer using Chrome, and then move over to our TV using Chromecast. If you use Bluetooth, you have to repair that controller somewhere else. However, with the Wi-Fi connectivity, you're essentially sending signals, you're sending packets to a server that can just maintain that connectivity no matter what device you move on. So if you switch over from one device to another, the controller is still connected. while it's switched on, while it is connected right there, it still maintains that connection there. Plus, Wi-Fi connectivity does tend to be stronger and it has less interference than Bluetooth for the most part, based on the way the technology works. So it's a smart move by Google because they've thought about what the premise of the device is and how it needs to work there, and also how they can make that transition from one thing to another very smooth.
Yeah, I mean, do we know? I don't think they've ever announced it, but I presume the way you log the controller in, you're essentially going to log it into your account, and then that controller is then paired with your Stadia account for however long it's is hooked up to it. So that allows you to jump from device to device, or because until we see the UI and the actual load up interface, like if I sign in on a Chrome desktop, controller's hooked up to the Google servers. Then I switch over to my TV via Chromecast. Like, we don't really know how that transition is going to work or look, because I know on stage it was very rehearsed, bang, 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 device, device, device.
I assume the controller's almost just linked in to your account per se, using some sort of code, using some sort of ID tag essentially, so that it recognizes when this device or when your account is logged into one device, it's connected there. When you move devices, that's the logical way I see it. But as you say again, a lot of this is speculation because really we don't know until we try it out or until somebody actually says this is the way it works.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Envisaging, I can't imagine. We get our founders packs, we open them up, you get your controller out, you get your Chromecast out, you plug that on the TV. Where do you start from there? You're going to have to somehow navigate to a landing page, which then hooks everything up, and you register your controller, you create our accounts, which we'll all have to go through. But yeah, these are the kind of little details that I think they're neglecting to tell us. But we want to know. But if Chromecast is anything to go by, I turn my phone on to the Wi-Fi in the house, and it pops up with a little memo if Netflix is playing somewhere else on the same Wi-Fi system, saying, do you want to pause it or stream it from that device? So if it's as seamless as that, then I can't see there being too many stumbling blocks with it.
An interesting one for me is what happens, say, for example, I go around yours, Chris, take my Stadia controller. Can I just walk into your house? I've already assume it's already previously synced with your Wi-Fi. Hit the button, and am I straight in jumping into the game with you? Or what happens if I pick up, say, a second Stadia controller of yours? Can I then select a profile like I can with one of your DualShocks when I go around yours?
Yeah, it might be interesting.
Interesting things there as well.
Well, what about this concept for you guys? Perhaps your account is linked to your controller, and then, as you say, so perhaps you take it almost like Street Pass worked for like the Nintendo DS, and you almost take the controller with you, and then it says like you switch it on Chris's Wi-Fi at his house, and it says like Richie would like to connect, and it's just a simple UI, yes or no, like say, do you want him to connect or not?
Yeah, I mean, Chromecast does it without. You don't actually need the Wi-Fi password to run off someone's Chromecast. When you go on the landing page, it tells you a short 4 or 5 digit code, I believe, and you type that into your Chromecast app on your phone, and that pairs it. So you don't need to go asking for Wi-Fi passwords and stuff. It's purely linking direct to the Chromecast device. So if it did something like that, yeah, I'm sure Richie presses a button, it finds the Wi-Fi network, and then so you'd imagine some prompt is going to show up on the screen saying Richie, Tom would like to join the game. And you approve it, just like someone trying to access your Wi-Fi. So, well, we can speculate, but
yeah, it's an interesting thing for like basic couch co-op stuff. How did that work?
I mean, they'll have definitely thought about it,
of course,
because there's some decent games that I'm really intrigued to jump onto and play some multiplayer when we do get our hands on everything.
Sure, we absolutely will.
What's everyone's favorite color for the controller?
Good question. I'm quite again we've had this conversation before, but I'm kind of really quite keen on the Wasabi controller they've released on the North American and Canadian stores. There's just something about it that I like, that sort of like minty green with lime green mix. But I gotta say, I'm a huge fan of the Founders kit, so I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think when I saw the midnight blue one, I was like, I like the look of that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when they launched the Midnight Blue DualShock, I bought one of them, so Midnight Blue is winning for me.
Great.
But Wasabi's actually bottom of my list.
Oh, okay.
I think the black on black it's a timeless look. It's always going to work.
I disagree with that, unfortunately. And that's just because I feel like with the design, the shape of it, it just feels... It looks cheap. It looks unfinished to me. Black on black for other consoles, yeah, fine. But this particular design, I'm not quite feeling it at the moment.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I'm really interested to get hands on with these, and
Yeah.
actually, like when you look at the pictures of it, just like I said, to feel that weight and that heft, because it's been a long, long time since I've seen something new. I think like that's again to take on an old model. It's not diverged too crazy. So we're not talking like N64 controller
Yeah.
style claw design here, or
Oh,
the
God,
Boomerang PS3 prototype one. But yeah, I'm looking for just get it to feel the texture on it, because I know I read that article that said about how they tried out different textures and stuff for the back. Because again, your hands can get quite sweaty depending on what you're playing over time. So I'm intrigued. Just get it and feel how like steady, how the buttons, how soft they are, if it's what that feel is. But yeah, I think back to what you said. At the moment, this is very much their first iteration. No doubt they'll have more. Even going into 2020, Base might launch with an Elite controller as well. Because I think if all the rivals come out next year with all these changes, essentially Google have got a year to kind of get themselves up to spec with everybody else.
They need a big year next year for
Yeah.
PlayStation 5 and Xbox 2. I'm going to refer to it as until we know officially. Google need
Yeah,
a year.
definitely. So we did have a question as well, I think on Twitter, which someone asked, where do we see Stadia in a year from now on the cusp of all these new PS5 and Xbox launches? So essentially, we've now got winter 2020, Christmas 2020 is when the new big boys are going to start coming out with their new products. Stadia essentially has a year to build up their portfolio, get the word out there, get some people in the door, and actually go from this. So where do we expect to see them in terms of their rivals a year from probably now? A year not too far from now.
For me, I'm sort of feeling that the first thing I need to see is I need to see exclusives. I need to see developers saying we are developing this in conjunction with Google, with Stadia. This is going to be a title you can only receive on Stadia here. And look at all of the things you can do that you cannot do elsewhere because of the technology. Whether that is something like the next Fortnite, the next PUBG, which is then expanding to 1,000-player battlegrounds and things like that. If they can pull something like that off, then I'm looking forward to the success. So in a year from now, I'm looking to see Stadia having several exclusives, including one big title that brings in a large audience. It could be a niche audience, whether it is people who like playing those battle royale games, or it could be a broad sort of hardcore gamer type audience. But that's what I'm looking to see over the next year ahead of the next console launch.
Yeah. It's so interesting to think that the big wigs up in Google actually have to sit there and discuss and think, actually, how do we want to go? What eggs are we going to put in which baskets? Like, do we go for a shooter? Do we go for a third-person action? Do we go for an MMO? It's such a wide kind of plate of food to choose from, where they can do anything, and it is really, like I said, it could be hit or miss. If the first one comes out and it's average at best, that's kind of kickstarting them off on this. It's so weird to think like a company has this option to just focus on one particular thing and make themselves known for maybe this particular style of game.
I think they need free exclusive for me. They need that big games on the games as a service game that is going to keep people going back to the same game time and time and time again. I think they need a very linear, story-driven game, something akin to maybe an Uncharted or Last of Us. And they also probably need a big open world action RPG, something like a Horizon Zero Dawn. I think if you get one of each of them hit in the first year, then it's Google saying, "Oh yeah, all exclusives." I think you're hitting a huge, big part of the market.
Yeah,
I think you've hit it right on the head there for me, Richie. The one thing you said that I caught from that in particular that resonates with me is it needs to be something that I want to keep going back to. If they can release one title that just keeps me invested and keeps me logging in daily, every other day, a couple of times a week, then I'm happy that I've put my money where my mouth is and go with Stadia. I'm happy with that. It just takes one to make me feel happy with what I've got.
That's it. It validates your purchase, doesn't it? Because the looking at the games that are going to come out over the next couple of months is, for a fact The Last of Us 2 is going to be a system seller for those people who don't already have PS5. It's a fact, and it really is. I saw this morning, I think it's Uncharted 2 is 10 years old today, and immediately that give me that desire to go back and play that game. I'll jump into it probably some point this week and test it out. Maybe it's on PlayStation now. but they need them flagpole titles. Now, my only hope is that with Stadia launching this year, these games have been in development for some time, because they don't have. The reality is they don't have the pedigree of a Naughty Dog, a Sucker Punch, anything like that at the moment. They can't just churn them out. So my worry would be we get into this time next year and we've maybe seen one, because again, you're talking 3-4 years of development. So hopefully these things have been in the pipeline for quite some time, and they're literally ready to be taken out the oven and good to go. My worry would be is they just purely rely on third party support, and maybe he's getting an indie game or two out, and we come into next year still saying we've not had anything yet. Just to be negative about it all. But obviously, hopefully, that's not going to be the case.
No, you've got to have a biased view looking at it, though, haven't you? You've got to look at two different sides of the argument more than anything. So you have to stay open-minded about the potential for the device, but you also have to, or to the system, sorry, but you also have to look at as well what might happen. Like, look at both sides of the coin, and I think you do have to sort of base that on what's currently happened a little bit, but.
Yeah, I mean, just look at how Microsoft has struggled with their exclusives. They've essentially, we mentioned last week, lost this generation based on not having their marquee titles that draw audiences in. They didn't have a Spider-Man, they didn't have a Horizon Zero Dawn, and yeah, Google, their studios, we don't even know what their pedigree is yet. They're literally cutting their teeth for the very first time. So I think we should definitely put our kind of brakes on a little bit, expecting these AAA world-class storytelling things, because essentially these people are brand new.
Yeah, that's it. I think there's a big difference between Microsoft and Google. Microsoft, an established player in the industry, and one of the big, Nintendo aside, one of the big two in the industry at the moment. So if they have a bit of a down generation,
yeah,
which their generation hasn't actually been that bad, it just hasn't been as good as Sony.
No, not at all. That's it.
They're fine going forward. Google need to get this off the ground. It needs to be a success, and they've got 1 year to do it before PlayStation 5 and the next Xbox consoles come out. So year 2 is going to be a lot tougher for them if they have a bad year.
Yeah, but I do hope that if we think back to when Xbox entered the market, that obviously gave us amazing franchises like Halo and Gears of War. Yeah. Like, there was some of their first franchises to start off, and here we are now. Halo Infinite's on the horizon, and Gears 5's fantastic. So they started off somewhere. That's the reality.
Do you feel like it came quite late in this generation, though, to finally have these exclusives coming out? Or do you think they're gearing up ready for those that next console release, that they're sort of saying, like, right, look, we are still here. We're still relevant?
Yeah, I mean, it's a never-ending battle, isn't it? It constantly goes on, and people can be quite fickle, and they'll just go to wherever the games are, is my opinion.
Yeah,
true that.
But I think a lot of Xbox's problems was the marketing day one. PlayStation came out and went, right, it's all about the games. There'll be other stuff there, but it's all about the games. Microsoft goes, oh, look at all this stuff it can do as well. And people are like, I'll go for the games, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is all about. And that's why going into next gen with Stadia, you don't have to buy the console, you just have to buy the games. So I think that segues quite nicely into question time. I think we've actually covered quite a lot of them off. About in regards to favorite colored controllers and such. We did have one question wrote in or tweeted in or whatever it was from Daniel Edwards, who asks, are there any confirmed details about Stadia's game prices? What about subscription packages?
So as far as I understand things at the moment, we've tried to have a look and gather all this information together. There's nothing really written in stone as to what is going to happen, but from the speculation or from what has been said thus far, it seems to me that games are still going to be as you would purchase them in stores. So however you get that, whether you pick them up from your local high street retailer, whether you buy them online, whether you get them digital, whether you get them through a platform like Steam or Epic Games Store, I think they're following that same sort of model. Correct me if I'm wrong with that.
No, I think that has been the disappointment from some people, is they were expecting the Netflix model of you pay a subscription, here's your library of games totally for free, where the reality was they're not going to do anything that drastically different. They've came out pretty much saying games will be industry standard. I expect a game on Xbox, Switch to be, third party especially, to be, I don't know, £50, $60, $70, whatever that may translate to, and that'll be the price across the board. I don't understand why they would be worth any less on Stadia. So people somehow expect like a digital discount and stuff. It's the same game.
People have got the wrong idea about Stadia, and Google have been trying hard to course correcting that. People think expecting this to be Netflix for games, so you pay a subscription and everything's there.
Yeah.
This is not that. It's basically a new box, but the box isn't in your house.
Yeah, and I do think that just comes with the world we live in now, where unfortunately they are trying to launch an entirely new platform without a console, which immediately people default to. Oh, so it's not. It's like Netflix. It's like Amazon. I don't have a box. Like traditionally, you would have a cable box in your living room for your TV. People now just presume TV where it's just streamed. It just comes from an app on your tablet or your phone or your smart TV. So I think launching into that world with a brand new platform that isn't the same as tradition, people naturally, I think, default to what their perceptions are of it already. And I think, it's going to take a little bit of time to get out of that model, but I don't think the game should be any cheaper just because they're digital.
No, I think I kind of like the way it's going to work here. It is like, again, as an avid PC gamer, I've invested a lot of time and a lot of money into platforms like Steam, where I've just bought games over time, bought them in sales, I've bought them when they've released and so on, and just played them. This concept is very similar to that. The only thing is I'm using my hardware to power it. So Stadia is going to work that same sort of way, in that you can purchase the games through their store in a roundabout way, but you play using somebody else's hardware. The downside to that is that you don't have anything physical to take away. So if the service goes offline, or if we have some sort of internet outage and so on, then you lose accessibility to that. You can't actually access it. You can't play the games unless you have that stable internet connection.
Yeah.
But as you say, it just seems like at the moment in this generation, this is the way things are going to work. It doesn't really seem fair on the developers as well, in a way, to offer their games on a monthly subscription package. However, going about that subscription idea, we might see some big developers. Like, I think there were some rumors that Ubisoft were considering looking at a subscription-based model on top of Stadia, to basically say, if you purchase, let's call it the Ubisoft Game Pass, something like that, then you have access to older Ubisoft titles, or you have discounts to newer Ubisoft titles as well. And then you can play those on a sort of monthly fee. But again, it's all speculation. We'll have to see how people really approach this at the moment.
I mean, they do currently have their Uplay Plus, which is their equivalent of that. And I know it runs off PC. It can run off their own store. I'm not 100% if it's up and running on Xbox yet, but I did believe, similar with EA and such, they were looking to bring it. And the way they currently tout it, it's about £12.99 a month. It's over 100 games. You get new releases, and you always get the premium edition. So like all the deluxe Assassin's Creed and all the perks and stuff. And much like Netflix, it's cancel anytime. But it is that kind of standoff fight place at the moment, where does the console manufacturer, Stadia, Google, Xbox, PlayStation, do they want that to be the model? Or are they trying to do this externally because it's better for them? It's such a weird moment we live in at the moment, where everyone's switching to this Netflix piece of the pie almost, where people want that subscription guarantee. But I think I mentioned it last week, we've hit saturation point where there's only so much outgoing money people are willing to give up. And adding another one on top of an existing service, it'll be interesting. If they go Stadia base maybe, and you pay your subscription to Ubisoft to play their games, so you can play on Stadia but via a Ubisoft subscription model, that could work. So you're not paying the £10 to Google and then another £12 on top of that to Ubisoft. But I don't know. In an ideal world, I'd like just pay one pass and have everything. But I know it's so segmented at the moment. It's very different.
It's hard to get everybody on board with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is, if you are only interested in Ubisoft games, you could get Stadia base. Obviously, you're not getting up to the 4K resolution.
Yeah.
But then you could literally just play. Like, you don't have to pay anything. You could just
that's it.
mouse keyboard, off you go.
And that's fantastic if that's what you want.
Already have.
Yeah, it really for me anyway. It's the collector in me, as you mentioned, Tom, not having that physical media to kind of sit on your shelf and look at. And I know that there's certain things I think people give a pass for when they go digital. But we'll see. Again, we don't know this information. That's the problem. So in terms of the price, I think they'll be the same. They're going to have discounts. They're going to have flash sales, just like they all do. But who knows? Hopefully, we'll find out in the next couple of weeks. Days even, maybe.
Absolutely.
So did we have any more questions wrote in?
I think that's it this week.
I think that was it. Richie, do you have anything to add on that?
No, not really. I think we're good.
We're good, cool. So we're coming up. We're just past the hour mark again. So we're doing really well at keeping this podcast under the hour. But hopefully you don't mind us running a little bit over every now and again. Because once we get talking, that's what's going to happen.
Can't shut
That's
us up.
You can't shut us up, yeah.
And we do like it.
We do like, yeah. I know. To be fair, yeah. If it needs to be, I'd rather not rush the end of the podcast. I'd rather we just kept going if we're in a natural vein of chatter. So anyway, yeah, we'll wrap it up this week. Thank you everybody for listening. Remember, if you'd like to support us a little bit more to help the podcast keep on podding, as I mentioned last week, you can head over to patreon.com/Sounds of Stadia and help out the SOS cause. And if you'd like to just keep listening for free, you can do on all the podcast locations: Spotify, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, which I only learned I think last week existed, but apparently there's a lot of you listeners over on Stitcher, so thank you for taking the time to find us on there. My name's Chris. That's been Tom, and over in the distance we've got Richie. Richie.
Apparently my name is pronounced with an echo.
It is, definitely. We've been Sounds of Stadia. Catch you next week. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Ciao now. Bye.
See ya.
Hey, it's Chris. Just for those people still hanging around, yes, I did swear at Florida and Texas earlier on, but I didn't mean it. Your soil is equally as good as Georgia's. Thanks for listening. See you next week. Goodbye.